My name is Rachel Zanes. I just wanted to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping details on behalf of the Alliance. So the first is just to note that this is all being recorded. This is just so the program can be shared with others and folks that couldn't make it today. Also, please note that everyone is automatically muted upon entering the meeting. So we ask that you stay muted unless you're asking a question or engaging in the conversation, or of course, if you're a speaker. There are two ways to weigh in with questions and comments during today's event. First, you can click on the participants button on the bottom center of your screen. You can raise your virtual hand by clicking on the raise hand button, and we'll call on you when it's your turn to speak. If you're joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Another way to engage is via the chat function, which can be done by clicking on the chat button on the bottom right of your screen. And we really encourage folks to use that chat box as much as possible, just to have a robust dialogue. And I think that's about it on the housekeeping front. So I will hand things over to Ann Stanton, President of the Alliance. Ann?
Thanks, Rachel. Hello and welcome, everyone. As Rachel said, I'm Ann Stanton. I'm the president of the Link Learning Alliance, and I just want to thank all of you for joining us today. I do see a lot of familiar faces and names on the line, which is actually a really wonderful way to wrap up our Spring 2020 webinar series. And today we're going to be discussing integrated project design, which is a core element of instructional practice in Link Learning, because it's actually project-based learning that brings the approach, and specifically the certification standards that ensure excellence and equity to life. As I think many of you know, well-designed projects are really essential to integrating pathway core content with career-themed coursework and work-based learning. Most importantly, though, they drive the educational experiences that utilize student-centered, collaborative, and project-based instruction in the classroom, while also building opportunities for students to reflect and provide feedback on their own learning experiences. So during today's conversation, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from people who are not only inspiring leaders in Link Learning, but really masters of this art, right, of building powerful and integrated educational opportunities for young people, both in the classroom and more importantly these days online. You're going to learn, I think, how to engage industry and post-secondary partners in curriculum design, how to assess learning through student portfolios and defenses of learning, and how these integrated educational opportunities drive both student activism and voice. Most importantly, we hope that you're going to see the direct linkages between project-based learning at its highest form and the knowledge and skills young people need to be ready for both college, career, and civic life. So with that, it's my pleasure always to introduce my colleague and friend, Cheryl Hiblin, who has been a leader of innovation, both in Link Learning and beyond in San Diego for quite some time. So with that, Cheryl, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ann. Hello, everyone. I'm Cheryl Hiblin, and today I'm really excited and both honored to be joined by some really amazing district leaders from LAUSD, Oakland, and Antelope Valley. So without further ado, Esther, can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm Esther Suleiman, Link Learning and CT Administrator in LA Unified.
Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Rebecca Lecoq, Oakland Unified Link Learning Director. Glad to be here.
Diane.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Diane Walker. I'm the Director, sorry, getting feedback there, Industry Liaison and Post-Secondary Partnerships, and also a District Link Learning.
And you can't see his picture on the screen, but I do have a co-pilot for this experience, and that is Dan Storrs, the Link Learning from the Link Learning Alliance. Dan, can you introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Dan Storrs, the Senior Director for K-12 Engagement, and welcome.
Okay. Well, thank you. So today our presenters are going to address challenges that they face implementing high-quality project-based learning in their respective districts. They're going to share some strategies that have been successful in addressing these challenges, and I'm really excited because you're going to get to see some graduate profiles, some frameworks, and some really interesting ways that they have brought work-based learning to life inside of the project. So today, Dan and I are going to help try to build a chat culture. We're going to encourage you to ask questions, build on the ideas that the presenters add, and share links to district resources. So if you have any projects that are working for you or any strategies that you want to share, we encourage you to do that in the chat. So we've asked the presenters to focus on two primary challenges. We looked at some data, both from the field and from our respective districts, and we asked them to focus on two areas. One was the challenge of the alignment of the Common Core industry standards and the work-based learning standards. And the second challenge was the alignment of meaningful, deep work-based learning inside of those projects. That work-based learning wasn't something that you did as a field trip or as an aside, but was something deeply embedded in project-based learning. So what, if we could advance back to the link learning slide. One of the things that Anne highlighted in her opening was that project-based learning, it really is the heartbeat of link learning. And link learning is grounded in this idea that if we change the way that students, content, and the teachers interact with one another, that magical things happen in kids' lives. And so we know that link learning allows students not only to have those interactions with teachers, but then to apply what they've done in meaningful ways through work-based learning. So I am now going to hand the baton over to our first presenter, Esther Solomon from LAUSD.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thanks to the Link Learning Alliance for inviting me to be on the webinar. It's a pleasure to be presenting with my colleagues Diane and Rebecca from Antelope Valley and Oakland. In LA Unified, our Link Learning support team works with over 70 pathways to grow more pathways as teachers, principals, parents, and students choose the link learning approach. We found one of the biggest shifts teachers have to make when they're adopting this approach is developing and implementing project-based learning. That is engaging, challenging, standards-based, multidisciplinary, with the CTE theme at the core of the project, and authentic. I can't imagine why people find this challenging. As our support team works with pathways, one of the biggest challenges of the PBLs is deepening the rigor and complexity of the work. One way we support our pathways is deepening the work is through the development of practitioner centers. We invite our gold pathways to apply, and those that are selected offer multiple opportunities for new and developing pathways to visit and to see their work. The practitioner centers develop the session or sessions based on the needs of the visiting pathway. And we're also growing a rich repository of PBLs for pathways to review and use. We feel that models and exemplars are so important to provide teams with so that they can understand the potential of this work, and so that they understand, first of all, that it takes time and revisions to create great PBLs. Through the practitioner centers, they also see and hear about the importance of setting high expectations for our students and making sure that we're providing students with complex and challenging work. The task quality criteria is an amalgamation of work from scale. And scale stands for the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity. Also Envision Learning Partners, and then also our own additions. It provides a guide for teams of teachers to work through and improve and deepen their PBLs. In this guide, there are 7 criterion, and I would suggest only using the guide with advanced pathways who have been doing this work for a while, as it's very comprehensive. For beginning pathways or those who have a particular area of focus for improvement, then I would suggest using that particular criterion. For example, the first criterion is about embedding deeper learning. And the guide lists what should be embedded in the PBL, such as standards, checking for math practices, or next generation science standards. Also, college-ready skills, making sure that you're including problem solving, argumentation, application, the higher order thinking skills, and also the district graduate profile. The guide also moves beyond the checklist to ask both for evidence of these rigorous and complex elements, and also to suggest for revisions. This template provides opportunities for teams of teachers to have deep and meaningful discussions about their own work and the work they're asking students to do. This guide has 6 other criteria, such as language use and expression, authenticity and alignment to the industry sector, suitability for diverse student populations, such as English learners and special needs students, and students' directions, prompts, and resource materials. This last one I think is really important because frequently I will go and listen to a prompt that a teacher has written, and I'm not quite sure what I'm being asked to do or what the student is being asked to do. So it's a great opportunity for Pathways teams to sit down and say, does this make sense to you? Is it clear? Because oftentimes when we're writing something, we think it's very clear, but not necessarily clear for the students. The last 2 criteria are scoring tools for feedback and processes for reflections and revisions. If we want to make our PBLs more rigorous, then we should find the ones that we have implemented and continue to revise them. Next. Some PBLs should not be repeated, but when you have ones that are truly engaging students in meaningful work, then keep reflecting and revising them. You can go to the change for change slide, please. This example, the previous slide, and there you go. This example is a project the freshman team developed in 2010 when I was the principal of our performing arts school. And they are still implementing it 10 years later. But now it looks like an entirely different project. It is so much stronger. Students learn how to create a campaign and implement it. And they garner monetary support for Heifer International. Heifer provides people with livestock and helps communities in poverty-stricken areas and teaches them how to farm and how to grow livestock. In this project, in their math class, students learn how to transform a 2D picture into a drawing into a 3D object. And these objects are animal shapes, the animals that are provided by Heifer. Students then use paper mache and design these animals and make them into mini banks in their theater design class. In Spanish class, students create slogans for buttons and brochures in English and Spanish so they can send them out to different businesses in the community along with the banks. Then they have to go into the communities and they have to convince the businesses to allow them to keep their banks there and collect money for Heifer International. Students write scenes in their English class, and then in the acting class, students perform them for the 5 other schools on the campus, raising awareness and funds for Heifer. At the end of the project, they present Heifer with a check to assist in ending hunger and poverty. I think last year they had over $3,000 that they raised for it. Heifer has been so excited about this project that they sponsored 2 of the teachers over the summer to visit El Salvador and see their work firsthand. Next. Our Link Learning team also creates rubrics for problem solving, analysis, and argumentation, so teachers can identify areas where students need support and ensure they have high quality responses, especially in their writing, which is one of the weaker areas that our students suffer from. And another PBL that was developed over several years ago, students were angry that vendors, those folks who sell food on the streets, were being ticketed because it was illegal in LA. Students in a video pathway created a documentary interviewing vendors and legislators. They edited the video, wrote argumentative essays and speeches, and then they marched down to City Hall, showed the video, and gave a few of the speeches. And a year later, City Hall legalized street vending with a permit. This kind of project can be implemented with any community issue, but the writing and speaking are very important. So having these rubrics assist teams in understanding expectations of strong writing and thinking is really essential. Next. Another strategy we have used with PBL work is a pitch panel. This can actually be used for any issue that a PBL is having. In this example, a 10th grade team presents their PBL issue to a group consisting of other faculty members, industry professionals, and student alumni. Those students, that it means those students who have already had the PBL, alumni from the PBL. The team holding the pitch panel then presents their dilemma, and the consultancy protocol is followed. After the presentation and the clarifying and probing questions, I suggest the 10th grade team turn around so that the group can have an honest sharing and more freedom to share their thoughts and ideas. Then the 10th grade team turns back around and reports out what they have taken away from the group's discussion. This is great if you want to involve a deeper level of work-based learning within your PBL, or if you want to have more rigor. Whatever the issue is, you can bring it, and it's so great to have a whole team working together to present possible solutions. It's a synergistic effect. Next. So what are our next steps? I think our Link Learning director and coaches would agree that we will continue to work with our pathways, providing them with tools and opportunities to deepen the rigor and to ensure they have authentic audiences and authentic work-based learning embedded in the PBL. For instance, I'll give an example of a time that was a great PBL, but the meaningful and purposeful audience wasn't quite there. So in our business and tourism pathway, students go on a Hollywood bus tour. Yes, it's commercial and it's somewhat superficial, but then they're tasked with creating their own LA tour. And some of them have come up with amazing tours, such as the Latino Mural Tour, the Real LA Tour, the Old Theaters of Broadway Tour, or the famous LA Crime Scenes Tour. So now I want to work with them to take the next step and hire a tour bus so that students can actually conduct one of these tours for a real audience. So finally, we are in the process of providing an portfolio to all of our students. Students can use these portfolio artifacts for their defenses. They can also use the portfolio for college applications, employment, a way of showing their growth. And it's also a way of celebrating their accomplishments, something that we don't do enough of. So thank you for this opportunity to share our LA Unified team's work.
Esther.
Thank you, Esther. Oh, sorry, Cheryl.
That's all right, Dan, go ahead.
All right, so I just want to say again, thank you, Esther, for that. And some of those work-based learning experiences are incredible in their kind of depth. But before we kind of go on with that and some questions, some folks have been saying they've been experiencing some problems with the screen, perhaps the slides being a little fuzzy. So I apologize for that. One thing I might want to recommend, I think Cheryl put in the chat, is turning off your video if you have it on and your mics, and sometimes that helps. Also, as an aside, all this is recorded. It will be shared, so you'll have access to all these slides later on, so you can kind of take a look, go through them at your own pace, and where you'll be able to see them clearly. So hopefully the problem will take care of itself as we continue.
Well, and Esther, despite the fact that we've had a couple comments about that, there's some really good stuff in the chat for us to bring to your attention so you could elaborate on. So it looks like someone who works with you named Stephen Hartman is talking about the fact that he's been in your pathway group, and in their particular pathway, one of their outcomes is to get seniors ready to be teaching assistants for LAUSD. We also have some comments. We have a middle school teacher who doesn't actually do PBL in her middle school, but the engineering teacher does. So I have two questions for you. The first one is, how do you support these teachers to come up with these great ways to apply the work-based learning that kids do, or the idea of working in LAUSD? And what can a middle school teacher do who isn't on a PBL team, but who's interested in supporting PBL in her school?
So to the first one, which I want to address about the teaching in particular, one of the ways that we've supported our teaching pathways is we got the district to agree that if students can pass 2 district exams, then they can, they're ready to be a TA in the district and work part-time as a TA as they attend college. And I'm really proud of the district to say our personnel commission was able to pull this off and offer those tests online during COVID-19. So that was a really exciting piece. We're also working with our early ed department in the district, and students will have opportunities to TA in early ed as well. So that's one way we're doing it. If middle schools want to do PBL, we're happy to support them. We also have a big staff of CTE advisors and a CTE coordinator who oversees that. And we have lots of support staff. They can email us and let us know, and we're happy to work with them on creating PBLs for their singleton class, or hopefully we'll grow it and make more people addicted to PBL, and we could do multidisciplinary ones.
Great. And we also have joining us today partners from PBL Works. Lisa Miralles, who's the Director of District and School Leadership, is on our call today. And we do want to share some of their resources. I know that they've worked with Esther in LA. And so we're posting a link to those in the chat. One thing I was curious to follow up on with Cheryl mentioned Stephen and creating the education pathway and the shutdown. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that is such a critical question for everybody. Now what, as they shut down and things get put on hold? And I don't want to put Stephen or Esther on the spot or anything, but maybe a little information on how you think about that now and how you think about these things that were teed up when this happened, and how you're kind of thinking about the future and how to do that.
Well, I would say it's a scramble right now. We want to thank a lot of our external partners for coming to the table and providing lots of opportunities. We have Summer Bridge going on. Lindsay Corcoran, our director, is working with all of our all of our Link Learning coaches to bring those to life so that our 8th graders have opportunities for Bridge. And those are happening now during COVID-19. They're doing either a health project or a entrepreneurship project. So we're working really hard to partner with our external partners on providing these kinds of pieces that we put then in our learning management system, Schoology, so that it's accessible to all our teachers.
All right, thank you. And also just want to acknowledge folks from Kentucky who are here and joining us today, and welcome, glad to have you. And so I think no more questions right now. Let's move on. And Rebecca from Oakland.
Sure, thanks, Dan. And thanks also to the Linked Learning Alliance and colleagues from Oakland who are on the call today, and from across the country. It sounds like even Kentucky on the call today. Project-based learning is really complex, and it's also really important work. And I just want to start by saying I'm really grateful to have this space to share and also to learn together. In Oakland, the problem we're trying to solve is actually a citywide one. It's a question of how we graduate students ready to contribute in meaningful and life-sustaining ways. In Oakland Unified, we have 33 linked learning pathways, and all of our 10th through 12th graders are in linked learning pathways. Our goal is to transform student outcomes so that students leave our schools truly college, career, and community ready. How do we meet the goals laid out in our graduate profile, pictured here? A key part of our solution is to fundamentally shift how we teach the basics. This tool pictured here is going to look somewhat similar to tools that you saw that were shared by my colleague Esther. Others of you may use something similar in your district. I want to mention that these resources are also available. I know for practitioners, when I've been on these calls, it's often very exciting to see the tools. The tools are available, so I want to mention that. Through project-based learning, we work with interdisciplinary teachers and with community members to solve complex problems through the application of technical, academic, and career readiness skills. Students learn about complex and authentic issues in their community. They activate their voices. They collaborate with peers and community members. They reflect on complex issues. They engage in critique and revision. and they always present novel solutions to a public audience. Project-based learning is a space where students learn through work-based learning, through interviews, through site visits, and guest speakers. Like many of you, we've been doing project-based learning for many years in Oakland Unified School District. Our approach and tools have been refined by expert practitioners in the district, many of whom in fact are listening in today. The PBL framework we currently use was developed by a broad coalition of pathway and instructional experts in Oakland Unified. It builds upon the Buck Institutes and reflects principles of social justice and civic engagement. Linked learning coaches and teachers collaborated deeply and over an extended period of time to develop the tools that we use today. They, in fact, reflect our values. We launched our largest ever PBL Institute last summer with over 100 teachers and linked learning coaches. Interdisciplinary teams collaborated over several days with coaching and support from site-based linked learning coaches, central discipline-specific specialists, and work-based learning staff. A conversation between a student and Kat Brooks, American playwright and recent Oakland mayoral candidate, opened and framed the week. Both reflected on powerful learning, activism, and social change in Oakland. Throughout the week, we hosted community and industry partners who consulted with teams on project ideas, sharing their perspectives on priorities and trends in the labor market. By the end of the week-long institute, teams had developed projects in various stages of readiness to implement. Coaches, though, were well positioned, having been involved in the project development during the institute to support teams in implementation back at their school sites the following year. Community partners, both civic and industry, are core partners in helping us achieve our mission of graduating students ready to engage and thrive in Oakland. Partners are essential in the role of helping to inform the design of projects, evaluating student work, and participating actively in the application of solutions developed by students through PBL in the community. I'd like to share with you a project that exemplifies deep learning through project-based learning to give you a better sense of how we implement PBL to transform student learning. The students in the Sustainable Urban Design Academy at Castlemont High School learned about issues related to a vacant lot on 73rd and Foothill and developed novel solutions that made a difference. The project involved the Pathway, the Black Cultural Zone, an East Oakland collaborative, City Council member Lauren Taylor, Civic Design Studio, and Pop-Up Village. Students learned in their sustainable design class about issues related to gentrification, land use, housing, healthy food, and community wellness. They worked as photographers, as surveyors, and interviewers as they went into their own community to more deeply understand the issues they learned about in the classroom. Students learned through work-based learning by interviewing police officers and local leaders. Some of them felt nervous, but they tried and they said that they found their voices. They said, "I'm just going to do it," and they did. Students gathered data and learned how to analyze it. They honed their design skills using SketchUp, enabling them to transform their ideas into models. They reflected, including personally on living in a garage, unable to pay rent on an apartment, and articulated that they could have their own community by designing it, that they indeed have tremendous power. The project brought together City Council member Lauren Taylor, who represents the district Castlemont is in, to inform students' thinking about issues our community faces. And he heard proposed solutions from students. And he said that he was truly amazed at the sophistication they represented. Council member Taylor even incorporated elements of the proposed solutions in the final RFA to developers seeking to occupy the vacant lot at 73rd and Foothill. The learning, innovation, and solutions derived by Castlemont students directly impacted their own community. As you've heard me say several times in the last few minutes, students and their success are what we are all about. Their voice and experiences inform our curriculum, our pedagogy, and our programming. They even inform our professional learning. Here you can see a photograph of the student and Kat Brooks that I mentioned a few slides back. Student voice is integral to curriculum design and the PBL design process. Students participate as experts and speak to the issues most relevant to them, the role of activism and leadership in their learning, and how collaborating with community partners prepares them to take action and achieve their life goals. At present, we all find ourselves in uncharted territory with distance learning. As you can see from this screenshot of an exhibition from a recent senior capstone project in Skyline High School's Green Energy Academy. We've never held exhibitions virtually. Despite the fear of the unknown, many of us also see the opportunity to further transform and achieve deeper learning and equitable outcomes. We are leveraging our relationships and capacity to connect with students, with each other, with partners, and not only stay afloat in these times, but to define a new educational landscape. We are broadening how we engage students and partners and how we collaborate between disciplines. In Oakland, we are leveraging powerful partnerships, deepening our focus on our students with the greatest barriers, investing in our teachers to ready them to navigate and thrive through distance learning. And we're doing it with gratitude for the resources and innovation, thought partnering from partners like you and from the Linked Learning Alliance. In this last slide, finally, I'm just excited to share this podcast produced by my esteemed colleague, Youngwon Choi, which features the 73rd and Foothill Vacant Lot project I shared with you today. You'll hear the voices of students America and Jessica, pictured here, students who reflect on their learning and awakening to community change and their own tremendous potential. We produce a podcast a few times each year, highlighting linked learning practices and the staff, students, and partners who make it possible. You can check it out in the iTunes store. Thanks again for this opportunity to share with you today. And I'll hand it back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Rebecca. And yeah, just to put in a plug for the Young and the Woke, I mean, you'll hear some powerful stories there. So I would encourage you all, if you haven't heard them, to go and listen to those. I also want to remind everybody that we really do want this to be interactive. While you're welcome to put questions in the chat at this point, you can also, if you click on your participant pane, you can raise your hand, and we'd love to hear your voice and hear from you. Whether you have a question or just want to contribute some thoughts to the conversation, we would welcome that. I do want to also kind of acknowledge some in the chat. Stephen responded about what they're doing with their teacher program and having the exams in this summer for some students. And so I again just want to point out and commend LAUSD and Stephen for what they're doing there and really matching needs in their district with their students coming out of high school. And so you can read some of the details in the chat.
And not to interrupt you, but I've been privately chatting with somebody inside of a middle school who's been asking some good questions. And the question was raised about, you know, if the CTE teachers are using Project Lead the Way, you know, could that be capitalized on for project-based learning? And I shared in the chat that it absolutely could be. There's modules inside of project-based learning, inside of Project Lead the Way, that core content teachers could connect to. Even if they didn't share a common prep, they could connect and help build up the engineering curriculum that way. One question too that came up in Esther's session, but I think Rachel or Esther could answer it, is the question about how to handle senior projects when electives are so different. Like when everybody's not doing the same thing at the end, how do you handle that?
Rebecca, did you want to take that, or I? So I don't know what, is that a middle school question, did you say?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so then there's really no room in the schedule for a lot of electives if you're really taking a linked learning program with the CTE as the core. So CTE for us is always at the core of the PBL. And then you're bringing in all of your core courses into that. Or like I gave that example of Change for Change, you're bringing in the Spanish teacher, right? That is, I guess, an elective in some ways. You know, they do have to have a world language, but yeah, so that's the way we do it.
And you also mentioned Project Lead the Way, Cheryl. And just to make it clear, there are a number of the linked learning pathways use Project Lead the Way curriculum, and some of the gold pathways are doing some excellent work with incorporating Project Lead the Way.
And I think it's like, you don't have to include every single class, every single PBL, right? Make it an authentic connection. Make sure that it is a organic connection and that you develop it from that place. And as you develop it with maybe 2 core subjects or 2 subjects, then you can expand it and bring in others. But having those kinds of synergistic conversations with the whole staff is really helpful to move that.
Yeah.
I also think, you know, just thinking back to my own Project Lead the Way, or PBL days, we used something that Envision Schools developed, which was the Senior Defense. So while we did our project presentations, we used the habits of mind to actually get the kids to be metacognitive about what they had done and what their learning was. So that helped us pull a thread through all the different types of projects that they could have been presenting for different clients. But the story and the narrative was similar because they were talking about their growth over time.
All right.
Yep, I think we are transitioning now to Diane.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Dan and Cheryl. And again, welcome to everyone, and thanks for participating today. And you'll hear many common themes similar to what both Esther and Rebecca have said during their presentations. The Antelope Valley Union High School District's academies have a long-standing history of using integrated projects over the years, both as a relevance and engagement tool for our students. These have ranged, as was just mentioned, from discrete integrated projects within a single classroom to those involving 1 to 2 classes in a single grade level, up to complex semester or year-long academy-wide projects. And student focus groups over the last couple of years have really told us that this is important and engaging work for our students. However, there has been an accompanying need to have a consistently high level of rigor in the projects across the board. Likewise, we've begun to extend the experiences to students outside the career academies, both in classroom settings and as a method to scale up more work-based learning experiences through direct and deeper industry involvement. Next slide. CTE administrators worked with curriculum coordinators in the humanities and math and science in our district's Ed Services division, as well as our professional development coordinator to implement this framework that you see. Some examples of this have included work with the Center for Performance Assessment and making standards work for integrated performance tasks. We've also worked with SCALE at Stanford. We've had summer training institutes for our academies where they develop projects as well. But in addition to that, we've had summer professional learning for teachers and administrators through PBL World, and I definitely recommend the resources that they are providing to you in the chat, as well as other links specifically for remote learning. Really excellent things there for all of us to use. Our district has also offered integrated curriculum professional development, which is focused on PBL, and they've had that for about 3 years. This allows teacher teams across subjects at sites to develop, implement, and evaluate projects. And just as Esther was talking about having the Spanish class do one thing and a drama class do another, an English class do another, these can be developed and revised over time to become the best projects they can be. We've also, as an offshoot of that, had something that we call teacher space professional development for those curriculum teams. And it's paid time outside of the school day for the teams to collaboratively work together on projects. And one of the issues that Cheryl mentioned was, how do we pair this with our work-based learning and make sure that it's deeply embedded within those projects? So as a corollary, we have had strong existing internship programs within CTE in our district, such as our Health Careers Academy, which has many students out in clinical rotations and internships at healthcare providers, offices, hospitals, and the like, and our Northrop Grumman High School involvement partnership in our engineering and business academies, where students get to put projects together and work on those with industry. And finally, things such as our career technical student organizations, which have projects involving industry partners as mentors, or our solar car team and unmanned aerial vehicle competitions in other academies that have industry mentors to work with the students. So just one of many examples of these projects in our Lancaster High School Multimedia and Engineering Academy, and I believe several of those folks are on the call today, happened through their annual Academy Showcase and Parent Night for incoming students. An opportunity arose giving rise to a high-level integrated project that lasted over a period of 3 years. A parent in the audience that evening is a contractor employee at NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center at Edwards Air Force Base located in our area. And seeing examples of work that students presented that they do in the Project Lead the Way engineering and multimedia strands of the Academy, he recognized a relationship to work that he was doing in his own job with autonomous guidance controls known as the NASA Traveler Project. One important takeaway from this is that our students' parents are a powerful resource to connect with, both for project ideas and for mentorship, along with being engaged in their students' learning. So this is just a quick picture of this NASA report graphic that shows the parameters of the Traveler Project. The Lancaster Academy turned out to be a part of the STEM demo process that you may see listed there, including mapping their school site with LiDAR, inputting data into a flight test system, and operating the drone simulator to test the software capabilities. NASA was particularly interested in getting data from subjects who weren't industry experts to see how the system would work with those who weren't engineers or pilots, although one exciting thing that happened was that the students were allowed to participate in flying some small aircraft, I believe. And then their test and performance data were incorporated into the NASA project. So as a consequence of this whole structure, the parent approached a teacher and a site administrator to figure out how students could contribute to his project. They determined that an after-school class could be formed, and in later years, this transformed to a club. The picture that you see here is of the NASA contractor in one of his regular meetings with the teacher and some of the students. The success of this model also paved the way for after-school programs at other sites, primarily focused on UAV or drone technology and robotics, but it's also replicable really to any type of subject matter. This graphic on the left shows our district's graduate student profile, and it shows how project-based learning in general, as well as this project in particular, is a natural fit for students to learn the characteristics and as a method for teachers to assess them. And as has been mentioned before, the senior defense is one way that students can show how these particular characteristics are formed and expand and grow throughout their experience in the Academy. Curriculum and assessments for the NASA project were created based on the Academy's existing engineering and multimedia course sequences and aligned with next-gen science standards, Common Core, and CTE standards, the graduate student profile, and Academy student learning outcomes. The course was set up with collaborative sub-teams that you see here on the right, and that's similar to what would be found in a regular engineering environment. Now, I have provided some planning tools that will be made available to you that show how this project-based learning can be set up with activities across the work-based learning continuum. So regardless of your grade level or what the structure of your class is, it can be made to fit there. And if anyone's interested, we have a specific list of standards that it's matched up with. And as has been mentioned before, authentic audience is key. It's a critical piece for the students. And our Academy students, teachers, and the NASA partners revealed the project to parents, elected officials, and other community partners at an evening event at the school site. Several months later, as the work continued to progress, the Regional Antelope Valley Board of Trade's annual Business Outlook Conference had a focus on education, and the planning committee decided that this project would be showcased to the approximately 600 people in attendance. The Academy not only had a display booth at the event, but 2 of the students and 1 of the NASA mentors presented to the audience from the main stage. Both of these point out the importance of authentic audience for the students as they got tremendous feedback from the community. Likewise, the Greater Antelope Valley Economic Alliance's Economic Roundtable report released at that conference featured the project as part of its annual STEM education article. And so finally, for our next steps, not only in this time of distance learning, but equally applicable during more normal times, we're working with our Antelope Valley Career Prep Council, Pathway and Academy Advisory Board members, and other community partners to expand this concept to scale up project-based learning for more students, as well as virtual work-based learning opportunities across the district. In addition to the PBL Works resources, one that we found that's a promising project-based distance learning model is the Future Ready Iowa Project Clearinghouse, and that link can be made available to you as well. So the district's framework that's already in place for PBL can be used to address industry partners and community ongoing needs, which can be placed into a district repository for teacher and student signups, with industry partners providing virtual telepresence and written feedback to students throughout the term of the projects. It's a win-win situation. So thanks again, and I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have.
That's wonderful, Diane. Sorry, I was so active in the chat, trying to keep up with the conversations. Dan, did you want to pull a question while I go back to the top and find one that I was working on?
Dan, you're muted.
There's a lot in here. You know, what's interesting, there's a lot in here that we're talking about, and I think the people from PBL Works probably said it the best. You know, this is really project-based learning, and doing it right really is about rethinking school and setting your priorities. So our friends from, I believe, PBL Works say you need to rethink time, schedules and planning time, rethink the approach to adult learning, and rethink resource allocation. And I think that was the response after people were asking, how do we do this well? It's a mind shift.
Yeah, Cheryl, is it okay if I jump in here? I'm Lisa from PBL Works, and I think the trend that I'm hearing from the 3 districts that have shared already is this deep commitment to a system-wide approach to build coherence, to build capacity in teachers, but also to support and create the conditions for this work to happen so that we can have kind of an impact on student learning. And so when you think about it, it's a systemic sort of mindset that people have to make this happen. And what I've really enjoyed hearing about, and I'm so excited, I want to follow up with all of you, is this deep understanding at the district level in these spaces about the need for collaboration and planning time, and about the need to serve as sort of matchmakers between industry and CTE teachers. That is really critical to support that effort at the school level. So I just put down, like, we kind of think about it in this way. We talk about school conditions and we talk about building infrastructure, and those are the 3 key elements that we focus on, because in schools that are really doing this well, that's what they're getting right.
And I would agree, Lisa, thank you. And we really appreciate what PBL Works does. Again, the resources are tremendous, and it really is a district commitment, as well as the commitment from the administrators at the site, the pathway coordinators or academy coordinators, and the individual teachers to buy into this process and understand that the students enjoy it, they engage, they amaze us with the types of projects that they do, the quality and the high level of work that they do. And based on those results and those outcomes, why would you not want to continue that with other students?
Exactly. We also had a question earlier on in the conversation saying, how does PBL impact A through G coursework? And I think that goes to the systemic nature of the work that you guys are talking about and how you think about that. But I wondered if someone might want to comment on that.
Other folks may want to comment on it as well. But for example, if you look at the UCCI courses that have the core academic along with the CTE, and they're created by teachers in both disciplines, again, it's a natural having that rigor, relevance, relationship, those application-based projects. They help students understand the depth of the academic content, and having the industry involvement and the authentic audience is just an additional piece that makes it even better for the students and the teachers. The teachers enjoy doing this as well. And with the UCCI courses being A through G approved, again, there's no reason not to do it from our perspective.
Thank you. Any more comments on that theme? We go on. Anybody want to chime in? Thank you, Lisa. So I wondered about the question of funding, and there was a lot of comment in the chat about, yes, how important it is to put the resources into compensating teachers or setting time aside for teachers to do the collaboration, the planning, all that's necessary to make this happen. And maybe think, as we read so much about what budgets are going to look like, what's going to happen. And I was wondering how you think about making sure when you think about building this in and planning, how do you make sure that this is front and center and a priority versus something that, oh, that's one of those things that easily goes by the wayside or gets cut. And I was wondering if you might comment on how you think about that.
Well, again, I don't know if one of the other presenters wants to chime in here as well, but we braid many of our resources, as I'm sure all of you do in your districts, whether it's CTE incentive grant, Perkins, K-12 strong workforce, as well as our general fund CTE budget, so that because it is a priority, we find a way to do it. And again, if it helps improve academic outcomes and student learning outcomes in CTE, then we will find a way to do it because it is a priority for us.
I think I can also add, I appreciate that, Diane. And I think it's a few things, and we've been doing it long enough in Oakland that we have a lot of champions. There's a lot of people that love project-based learning. I think one of the keys is to not be fixed about how many disciplines have to be involved or it needing to last a certain amount of time. So having some dynamicism about how PBL is approached. And definitely, as you said, Diane, braiding the funding. And one anecdote, I have to call it because I'm not directly involved, but that I'm really heartened by is that some of our schools, as we're anticipating probably, the possibility, I should just say, of starting school in distance learning in the fall, fully, potentially, is the teachers have this keen awareness that is so inherent to linked learning, where they're really clued into each other and their students, and they're really accustomed to collaborating. And so what they noticed from March 16th to the end of school during shelter in place is that students were really challenged to have so many Google classrooms to go into, that it was just a lot to manage. And so I've been amazed that some of the schools are looking at creating these integrated and highly structured single front doors for students at the beginning of school. So they are doing project-based learning and integration in one Google Classroom so that students at the beginning of the year walk into a 4 to 6 week project, as opposed to math here, ELA here, you get the drift. But to me, that really reflects a deep commitment and familiarity and trust in working together and in the power of projects. And it also, again, is just super student-centered.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I would point out in all this discussion about the kind of systems work going on that the Link Learning Framework provides the opportunities for that kind of systems change. And, you know, we're happy to be a part of this. And that's, I think, one of the kind of uniting features of what all our speakers here are talking about today. So I really appreciate that. And let me see, I don't know, Cheryl, if you were looking at and welcome any comments on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of, so there's a lot of comment in here about the UCCI courses. And what's interesting is because districts have the ability to classify them the way they want and submit them for A to G the way they want, some districts are using it to count for a CTE or a core course, and other districts they aren't. So that's something I'm noticing in the chat, is that maybe the way we use courses or the way districts use courses can be a blocker that we need to overcome.
I just want to comment on that, Cheryl. I absolutely agree. UCCI courses, we've been trying to get them in our district for years, and it's very frustrating. So it would be great, maybe the Link Learning Alliance could help us and assist us with looking at overall across the state, how are districts using the UCCI classes, so that maybe we can come up with some argument that says this is how they should be used and everybody adheres to that.
Well,
go ahead, Cheryl.
Another data piece on that that's coming out of the chat is people are comparing, you know, our A to G rates of Link Learning schools higher than A to G rates of, like, let's just say regular schools. And people are talking about that in the chat. And I can tell you just from my own experience in San Diego that one of the schools that was challenged with A to G, the minute that they went wall to wall and did master schedule reform and added UCCI courses in, one of the biggest gains in A to G readiness with a C that we saw in the city.
That was Lindsay Corcoran from LUSD, and we have definitely seen a rise in the A to G, but also overall data for the last 3 years as we compare it with district data. The linked learning data is infinitely higher in each one of the categories.
Great.
Graduation rates, EL, it's the right thing to do for kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good way. We're coming up on the end of our time. I would say, you know, just in doing these, in doing our reviews for certification, and especially the gold certification, it is important, and that's one thing kind of I see is it isn't just about the specific work and kind of checking boxes of things that you are doing that are within the Link Learning Framework, but it's seeing the really systems level and systemic work and deep nature of the integration that we see through certification that is really most moving, and also where you then see the deep impact with students. And I would also like to say that today, one of the themes that I think all three of you, of our presenters here today, talked really eloquently about was student voice, and how student voice comes through, and how important it is, and how motivating it is for developing the projects we do in our industry partnerships. And so I really think that really is at the core, goes to the core of equity and engagement, and ultimately the student outcomes. We actually are going to put something in the chat. I think it's there too. There is, speaking of student voice, an opportunity for students to share their stories, and there's a link in the chat for you. And so we would encourage you to share that with your students. So again, if there are any last comments, happy to take that. Otherwise, thanks very much to our presenters today, to Esther, Rebecca, and Diane, and to Cheryl for helping to moderate and putting this together. And let us know if you have any questions, and hope to continue to be in touch and continue the conversation.